Hey there, and welcome back, my friend. So, I just want to say right off the bat, if you like true crime, please hit that subscribe button. But this episode is going to be pretty crazy. It does involve children, so if you don't want to listen to this, just please skip this video. Trust me, I didn't want to talk about this either, but I've had several requests to do Albert Fish. He's a psycho. He is disgusting. So yeah, that's who we're going to talk about today is Albert Fish. If you guys do like this makeup look, I did do my makeup before the video today. We have a lot to do here and, it's just a lot to cover. So I will list all of this in the description below and my jewelry too. So you don't have to ask. That's where it'll be. And then also, happy Halloween, my friend. And also, if you are new here, I do true crime sprinkled in with other creepy, legends and stories and whatnot, and true life, events. So if you like that, hit subscribe and, yeah. Because if I do too much true crime, I notice that I start getting nightmares. I'm interested in true crime just because I feel like we need to know what's going on, in the heads of these kooks around us. It's just, it's just good to be aware of things, and it's so sad for the victims, and I always just feel so bad, especially in this case, if I have not said, my name is Anna Fekete-Mustafa, and like I said, I don't do true crime every single time, but I have been being asked to do true crime so much. People find it so interesting. So here we go. Again, viewer discretion is advised. Please step away if you do not want to hear any true crime today. This case in particular is really messed up. It's really bad. So here is your option to go now. Okay, for those of you who stayed, let's move on. We will be covering child abuse, child murder, torture, mental illness, and some cannibalism too. Albert Fish. His birth name was Hamilton Howard Fish. He was born of May in 1870. So yeah, this is definitely an older case. Still terrible. He was born into a family of 5 siblings, and he lived in Washington, D.C. So he changed his name in his teens to Albert because that was his brother's name and his brother had died. There's nothing anywhere that really states how his brother had died, but Hamilton started using his brother Albert's name. So don't get confused. I'm going to be calling him Albert just because everyone knows him as Albert Fish. And I guess he really hated the name Hamilton because when he was a kid, he used to get bullied and picked on and the kids would call him Ham and Eggs. And that really bothered him, as it would. No one likes to get bullied. So Albert's parents, Ellen and Randall, they had a 43-year gap age difference between them. And Randall, Albert's dad, was in his 70s when Albert was born. So he didn't have a lot of time with his father. In fact, Randall died when Albert was only 5 years old. And when Randall died, Ellen lost her mind. Ellen was already mentally unstable, so losing her husband just set her off, set her off the edge. Ellen suffered from visual hallucinations and she heard people. She heard things that weren't other people weren't hearing or seeing. So yeah, she was hallucinating. Yeah, so not a good sign. And so when her husband Randall passed, the hallucinations just got so much worse. She definitely couldn't take care of herself, and she definitely couldn't take care of her children. So she made the decision to just give them away and give them up for adoption, and they went to an adoption agency. Back in those days, they'd call it an orphanage. Kind of reminds me of the Rescuers, when little Penny was in the orphanage and, how bad she was treated there. And, and that was just a Disney cartoon. Yeah, you'll we'll go on. There's some bad stuff that happens to Albert here. Orphanages, they were actually pretty bad. Catholic orphanages in the 1800s, children were subjected to like constant abuse, sexual abuse, sometimes murders, mutilation. These orphanages back then were definitely not a place to go for safety. Nope. Lots of these naughty nuns running around just asking if you love Jesus, but then you're beating on children and doing all these things. I don't think Jesus likes. I don't think Jesus likes it, okay? You're not doing it right. Like, these kids already have had a rough life. Like, you think they want to be there? No, they don't. Leave them alone. Talking to people in the 1800s. I'm talking to people now, too. Leave the kids alone, you guys. Just horrible. Jesus is looking down at you like, no. You've been reading those pages wrong, sis. Okay? You've been reading them wrong. So, St. John's Orphanage in Washington, D.C., Albert had said that just about every day he was beaten there. By the nuns, by the other kids. So, I guess the nuns would strip the kids naked and then whip them to humiliate them in front of all of everybody who was watching, which was everybody. Like, all the kids were made there to sit there and watch. Like, what the heck? Like, are you serious right now? That's disgusting. I mean, this will definitely mess you up one way or another. It's like trauma, abuse pattern, you know? Not okay. So, Albert had said that over time, he would switch this, switch in his head. And when he was getting beaten, he was actually starting to enjoy it. And after some time, the beatings started to make Albert climax. Oh my gosh. And then after a while, Albert started beating the other kids, and then he would also self-harm. Albert would burn himself with ropes and even swallow needles, and all as a little kid. Swallow needles? Ugh. Just going downhill, downhill, and the road up ahead is not looking too good, you guys. And it's not. So Albert started reading a lot about true crimes and criminals, but not the same way that we're doing it, you guys. He was getting off on other people's pain and other people's suffering. And he was also getting off on his own pain. So Albert's mother, Ellen, yeah, remember her? Yeah, so over some time, she starts to kind of get it together. So she ends up getting Albert back from the orphanage and brings Albert back to the family home when he was roughly 10 years old. I mean, I guess that's great, but, the damage has been done. So, good luck. All of that trauma and abuse had already set something from underneath Albert. So, too late. Albert was showing all kinds of disturbing signs. He was self-harming and he was wetting the bed. And then Albert started hanging out with another kid his age. I mean, good. That's great, right? A friend. Yeah, right. When they would get together, I guess they would drink their own urine. Ooh. And they would eat their own feces. Yep. That's what they're doing when they're hanging out. I mean, who doesn't do it, right? Just kidding. No, gross, not funny. That's disgusting. So I recently just watched this whole cult type thing. And the leader of the cult was drinking his own urine on the daily. And then everybody in his cult, he made drink their urine on the daily. So everyone had to drink their own urine in this cult. What is that? Is this a sign? I think so. I know that you can drink your own urine if it's a survival moment, if you're lost in the woods and there's no water, you're able to do that. But who does it just because they want to? That cult leader was saying, there was all these benefits to it. No, just let it leave your body, bro. Don't put it back in, okay? So Albert would spend his like weekends at like public pools and stuff. And he would say that he loved to go there because he could see like people like changing, like in the changing areas, like the men's changing areas. He could see people naked, people half naked. And remember, like Albert's only like 10, 11-ish at this time. He said he would just love to go into the guys' like bathhouses and watch them dress and undress. Okay, so this is really weird. So Albert would go like, he would like read the newspaper and go to the classified ads, and he would answer like ads, like not just any ads, of course, but women who wanted to get married. He would answer these ads. So it's kind of like 1800s version of online dating now. You know, unmarried women back then were like spinsters, so they were, you know, trying to get themselves out, you know, get themselves a husband. So Albert would get off on sending like vulgar, like just nasty, like letters like to these women. You know, like kind of like those like sugar daddies in your DMs, you know, type of situation, but not even like those dirty guys who just, you know what I mean? Like there were freaks back then too, just like today. Yeah, so he really liked to do that. Yeah, he was weird, okay? Not saying that people really outgrew that like in this day of age, but anyway, moving on. So Albert is in his teens now, and Albert needs to find a job. So Albert's thinking to himself like, I'm gonna make my way to these like bathhouses, go get a job there. I love those bathhouses. And so he does. And he gets involved with sex work there in the bathhouses as a teenager. It's what he loved, and the business was really good for Albert. Like, he kept sex working up until like his 20s. And in his 20s is when Albert moves to New York, and then he does his like sex work there full time. So it's 1894, still haven't even hit the 1900s, and Albert has a new friend. So his friends worked at the docks, and the docks were widely known for sex workers. So Albert and his friends were hanging out on the docks, and his friend introduces him to Captain John Davis. And Captain John Davis, you guys, he's disgusting. So I guess Captain John Davis's like ship was en route for China, and China was not doing so well during this time period. So his ship like shipped back and forth during this time period in the 1800s. And at this time it was called North Chinese Famine. From like 1876 to 1879, and you guys, it was so bad. Millions of people had died during this time. Millions. So at this time, meat was so very expensive, and people were so desperate that they were selling their own children for meat. Yeah, you can kind of see where this is going. This is disgusting. And this captain, being as sick as he is, like, he was bragging to Albert about this. The captain had told Albert that he had acquired a taste for human flesh. The captain told Albert that he had been eating the meat of children from China. He had told him that even one time he kidnapped a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old, and he killed and ate them too. And that really tickled Albert. So Albert goes out and he starts retrieving all of these books on cannibalism and serial killers, and he just goes down the rabbit hole. Like, he lost it. So, you know, Albert's in his 20s, and like, he's getting older. He's the youngest of the five siblings, and his mother Ellen was thinking, it's time for Albert to settle down, you know, find himself a wife. So Ellen decides to play matchmaker for her son. He's now 28, and he finds Anna Chaplin. So yeah, she arranges this marriage, and Albert marries Anna, and Albert gets a respectable job as a house painter. So Albert and Anna go about to have like 6 children together, which was like really normal for back then to have like, you know, 6, 8, 10 kids. Like, That was the norm back then. So, they had 6 kids. But it did not take long before Albert got bored. And Albert did get sent to prison for fraud. I don't know what kind of fraud he got in trouble for. I mean, this was in the 1800s, so it's like, the information kind of gets like lost, that kind of information. It's like the information we have is what we have, and that's what we're going off of. So when Albert gets out of prison, he's just right back to his nonsense again. Yep. And in the next 6 to 7 years, he starts sexually abusing young boys. Yep. And Albert also has his first kill. He said he would victimize, like, poor people because, in his words, they would not be missed. No one would care. So that's, like, where he kind of started, was victimizing, like, less fortunate families. He was also targeting people of color, and he was targeting people with mental health issues. And his job as a painter, like, basically allowed him to take jobs anywhere. So he could go, like, anywhere he wanted. He loved to target the physically, like, disabled. He's just an evil person, you guys. And he was not completely satisfied with rape and killing. Like, he had to have the torture in there. Like, that's what satisfied him, was the torture. Sexual sadism. Sexual sadism is not consensual. In 1910, he claimed to have his first sexual sadistic victim. A 19-year-old disabled man named Thomas Keaton. We don't know how he got Thomas into his, like, filthy grasp. We don't know if like, he lured him in somehow, like, asked him for help, or if he just straight up kidnapped him. We don't know. Albert said he took Thomas to a farmhouse and tortured him over the course of 2 weeks. So Albert's words: "I shall never forget the screams or the look that he gave me." So after torturing Thomas for about 2 weeks, he reaches his, like, ultimate goal and cuts off half of his penis. Before leaving Thomas in that farmhouse, he poured peroxide on his wounds, and then he gave Thomas $10 and kissed him goodbye. What? And there is no record that tells us if Thomas had lived or died, like, after this point. And don't forget, Albert is married with 6 children, and he's finding all this time to do all of these twisted things to people. And let me tell you, he was not hiding it very well, because Anna was becoming a little suspicious. She knew something didn't feel right. And so in 1912, Anna makes the decision to leave Albert. After 9 years married, which is crazy back then. Like, back then, that is frowned upon, but Anna didn't care. But the messed up part is, she didn't just leave Albert, she left her 6 kids as well. And it was said that Albert did not take this very well. He did not take Anna leaving him very well. So he had to find something to cope with his pain. Yeah, he wasn't taking, Anna leaving him very well, but what you're doing to all these people is okay with you? Yeah. So to help Albert cope with his pain, he started eating raw meat, and he started feeding his children raw meat. And then he started stabbing himself in the testicles with needles. Yeah. Just stabbing them with needles. Yeah, that's what he was doing. And not just the poke, you guys. He was stabbing them all the way through the sack. Yeah. It all helped him when his wife left. Yes, what? So now Albert is deep within his torture phase. He started working on these things called the instruments from hell. And these were different tools that would help him torture children. Like paddles covered in nails, meat cleavers, and like a bunch of knives with like different edges on them. He stated that crafting these items helped with the pain of his wife leaving him. Yeah, we're not idiots. We know that's not why you wanted to do that, you crazy psychopath. So Albert is 40 now, and he is ready for his second chance at marriage. So he's moseying through those newspaper ads, trying to find himself the perfect match. You know, wifey number 2. But, you know, Albert's sick, as you know by now, and he was asking them in letters if they would like to join him in inflicting pain and torture on children. Yeah, if they would want to, join him doing that. And he was really graphic in his letters, and of course, he had no takers on that. Nope. Also, nobody reported him, but... you know, maybe they just thought, you know, someone was pranking them or something. Who knows? And it was like a long time ago. We know to report people now, don't we, guys? Yeah. Yes, we do. But Albert did end up finding another wife, and they were married from like 1912 to 1915. And Albert started getting all these new painting jobs. So he got this job with this church, and the church was like paying him commission to like paint all of these like pretty angels on the ceiling. So Albert's second wife ends up leaving him as well. And so now Albert's saying all of the angels that he's painting on the ceiling of this church are now talking to him. He is hearing voices within the church, and they are telling him to commit crimes. Okay. He said, in the name of St. John, the Apostle. So if you don't know, St. John was the dude that wrote the very last book of the Bible, like Revelation. And this book reads like a horror novel. It's about the end of times, the 4 horsemen and the all-ending diseases, the sea boiling, the earth dying, just blood everywhere. Okay, blood everywhere. Just horrifying. So according to Albert, St. John was telling him to commit these crimes. He said he truly believed this and that he had to obey. He had no choice. Me personally, personal opinion here, he's lying. He's so lying. So starting in 1924, some of Albert's like visual crimes started to surface. And Albert is now 54 years old. So back then, 54 years old was kind of like recognized as that time of life when you're like the grandpa, like, you know, like 54 was like older back then than it is today. Because today 54 is like, you know, you think grandparent, you're thinking 70s. Like, you know, I mean, I'm a grandparent, I'm in my 40s, but you just don't think like you would see somebody with like the gray hair, you know what I mean? Like fragile, like body until they're much older. But back then, that was the age where people started to look like that. And Albert started to look like that. So he decided to take advantage of this and play that sweet grandfather-looking role. So people said that Albert had really beautiful light blue eyes, and they were warm and welcoming, and that he was very soft-spoken. So, like, he was just, like, super inviting, which is a bad recipe for this kind of a criminal. So this grandpa stage of his life became a tool that Albert could use to his advantage. On July 19th, 1924, an 8-year-old boy named Francis McDonald was playing on his porch in Staten Island, New York. So Francis's mom, Anna, another Anna, she notices down the street some man like walking to the end of the street and back. So, Yeah, she thinks that's kind of weird. She later describes this man as an old, fragile man with like a drooping mustache. She also later stated that this man was talking to himself and was making like jerking like motions like with his hands. She remembered him because of how odd his behavior was, like he was acting weird. So later that day, Francis does not make it home, sadly, after playing baseball with his friends at the park. And the first person Anna thought of was that weird man that was walking down the street. So Francis's friends said that Francis was lured into the woods by an elderly man with a gray mustache. So the friends go and try to look for Francis, and that's when they sadly come across Francis hanging from a tree in the woods. I hate this, you guys. I hate talking about children this way, but he was hanging from the tree by his own suspenders. Gosh, when I was first researching all this stuff, I was like, I can't spit these words out. This is too sad. I can't. Thinking about my own grandchildren, my own children this way, I can't even Yeah, so got the words out. Wasn't easy. But very sadly, there's so much more to say. And it's not going to be very easy. So Francis was sexually assaulted. He was strangled. And he was mutilated. The entire back half of Francis's thigh was cut off because Albert took it home and he ate it. Yeah, he ate it. Horrifying enough, Albert was never caught for the murder of Francis. So sad. He did get the nickname Gray Man, though. And that nickname came from the media after Francis's death. The next murder that Albert did claim was that of a 4-year-old boy named Billy. On February 27th, 1927, Billy Gaffney was last seen in his Brooklyn apartment in the hallway playing with his friend. So they find Billy's friend on the rooftop of these apartments, and he's freaking out. He's telling all of the adults that the Boogeyman came and kidnapped Billy. So then the police are called, and everybody in the neighborhood is out searching for Billy. So there was a trolley driver, and he said that he had seen a boy that looked like Billy walking with an elderly man. And it seemed like this elderly man was trying to keep Billy from crying. And I guess this is the only clue that the police ever had on Billy. Billy was never seen again, and his body was never found. Albert did later on come out to explain what he did do to Billy. And here is what he said. Albert said he took a 4-year-old Billy, took him to this dump, strips him naked, ties him up, and gags him with a dirty rag. Albert then burns the little boy's clothes. This is so hard. And then Albert leaves him there at the dump overnight. So Billy has to spend the night naked, tied up at this dump site. So Albert left because he wanted to go grab some of his instruments from hell to use on poor 4-year-old Billy. So Albert comes back the next day around 2 p.m. and poor baby Billy is still there. So Albert takes his biblical cat whip instrument that he had made, and it's basically like a leather whip with 9 strands of whips at the end. It's designed to rip flesh off the body. Albert had constructed one of these out of leather belts, Albert was disappointed because he only had like 6 lashes instead of the 9, but he decided like, this will work. So he whipped Billy until he said that blood was pouring down Billy's legs. You guys, this is so hard. Then he cut off his ears and he cut off his nose. And then he like slit his mouth from ear to ear and gouged out his eyes while he was still alive. And then Albert said this was the point where Billy died. I just want to go back in time and just save little Billy. Oh my gosh, like seriously, and just do these things to Albert that he's doing to these kids. Like he might just get off on it, but I like whatever, like until he dies. That's what he deserved. Like seriously, like that is the most disgusting thing that I've ever had to read, you guys. Like I had to read this and then I have to re-say it now. Like it's really bothersome. So Albert took all the cuts, like the nose, the ears, parts of Billy's face, part of Billy's buttocks, and part of his tummy, and his male parts, and Albert took those home. All of his other parts he did put into a potato sack and throw them into a pool of slimy water on the side of the road. Albert called the parts of this child his meat. Yeah, that's what he called it, his meat. He cooked it up and he ate it. So from Albert's disgusting mouth, these are the words that he said, okay? The front of his body I liked best, a nice little bum roast in the oven to eat. I made a stew out of his ears, nose, and pieces of his face and belly with onions, carrots, turnips, celery, salt, and pepper. It was good. I never ate roast turkey that was half as good as a sweet, fat little behind did. I ate every bit of the meat in about 4 days. That's disgusting. That makes me like literally nauseous, like sick to my stomach right now. And like I said before, Albert was never caught or even looked at as a suspect. We didn't even know until later on. And so at this point, after Billy's murder, he got a second nickname, the Boogeyman. Okay, so in 1928, Albert is now almost 60 years old. And when does it end? Well, not right now. So Albert plans an elaborate way to catch his next victim, an 18-year-old boy named Edwin Budd. So Albert puts an ad out in the newspaper and he's going by the name Frank Howard. So he's going to pretend that he needs like help. He needs a worker. He pretends to be a farmer on Long Island. And he wants to give somebody a job in this place called Farmingdale. So in his ad, he wanted to offer room and board and then $15 a week, which, isn't bad back then. Like money, was way different. So Edward sees the ad and he responds to the ad. And then Frank, who is Albert, hires Edward. So Edward lives in the meat packing district, back then it was like where they did all of that. And so Albert went to Edward's house. There were like all these like slaughterhouses and meat packing like districts there. And this area where Edward lived was pretty darn poor. Like people were literally starving to death in this area. So Edward's thinking, this is a great opportunity for my family and I. I'm so just blessed to have this job. This is just what Edward's thinking. So on June 3rd, Albert shows up to Edward's house and he comes with gifts. He brings the family creamy cheese and strawberries. They were so charmed by his gifts and they just loved Albert straight away. So they invite Albert in, and this is when Albert meets Edward's little sister, Grace. Grace was 10 years old, and Grace suffered from anemia. So she was weak and tired and lightheaded all of the time. Grace really liked Albert, like, straight away. You know, he had that grandfather, like, charm that we were talking about earlier. So Grace sat on Albert's lap and just started talking about her school. She told Albert how she couldn't find any friends. And so here Albert's thinking, easy access. So horrible. So he decides to give up his whole plan with Edward. Albert now wants to take Grace. He completely just played on her innocence. So Albert tells Grace, you know, if you're like lonely, I have a niece your age and I'm actually going to her birthday party right now if you want to come with me. And Grace's parents already trusted him. Already, you know, just because he brought them some fancy food. Like, come on. Come on, you guys, don't fall for it, okay? This day and age, we've seen all of these like true crimes and everything already. We know how it goes. And that's what the importance of watching true crimes are, to learn these things. Do not trust anybody with your children, okay? So Grace's parents, of course, let her go. Why not? We met you 1 hour ago. Whatever. Makes me so angry. He was a frail man with a gentle voice and, you know, very grandpa, beautiful blue eyes. So what? So he tells the parents that he will drop Grace off later after the party and then come pick Edward up like a trade-off and then go to the farm with Edward. So the two of them say their goodbyes, and sadly, this is the last time anybody would ever see Grace. So later on, it started getting really late, and Grace's mother started to worry. I mean, she should have just went to the birthday party with them. I mean, any good mother would have. So they're not even thinking that he did anything wrong or whatever, you know. They're just thinking, oh, okay, like maybe they got in an accident. So the next morning, they phone the police and they give them all the information, and the police like run everything through whatever, and there's no reports of any accidents, and they had no like information on Frank Howard from Farmingdale. Gosh. All they had was 2 fingerprints, and you know that like forensics were like nothing back then. Like seriously. And then they had like a signed telegraph from Frank Howard. So William King was assigned to the case. He said he was grilling every known pervert and pedophile that like was known of. So 2 years go by and this case is growing cold. Then a potential lead comes up and a woman turns in her 66-year-old husband. She was saying that her husband, Charles Pope, showed up with a little girl around the time of Grace's disappearance. So when the wife turned him in, the police thought that they had gotten their man. So they had Charles Pope do like a writing sample to try to match it to the telegram, and there was no match, of course. So Grace's mom like took a peek at him and was like, oh, kind of sort of looks like him, I guess. Like, what? I cannot with these people, you guys. If you can't even remember what the guy looked like to even like see the difference between him and somebody else, then your daughter probably should have never went anywhere alone with him, right? Yeah. You trusted him without even really, you don't even know what he looks like, bro. Come on. And then also Charles Pope's like fingerprints did not match either. They still ended up taking Charles like all the way to trial, but his case got dismissed. So Albert now gets himself into another marriage. In 1930, he gets married to a woman in one of those, like, you know, matchmaking places, you know, for desperate people. That's what the ad said for this place. Matchmaking service for desperate singles. That marriage only lasted for about 1 week. So Albert finally, like, the police, like, caught on to Albert for writing all those crazy letters, and he ended up getting arrested for that. And because of these letters, he actually got committed into one of those hospitals for a while for mental illness. Albert was put into observation at Bellevue Hospital in New York. And they could tell that he knew right from wrong, but he was very sexually sadistic. So it's June 1934, and Grace has been missing for 6 years now. One man had a lead that he ended up sending to Grace's family. And who was this man? Frank Howard, a.k.a. Albert Fish. So Frank Howard had written a handwritten letter with all of these gruesome details about what happened to Grace, to Grace's family. So in this letter, Albert had wrote about the captain and a steamboat with eating all the children from China. In this letter, he did confirm to being a killer. Okay, so I'm going to read what his letter said, from Albert's writing. My dear Bud, on Sunday, June the 3rd, 1928, I called on you at 406 West 15th Street. Brought you cheese and strawberries. We had lunch. Grace sat in my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her on the pretense of taking her to a birthday party. You said yes, she could go. I took her to an empty house in Westchester. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs and stripped all of my clothes off. I know if I did not, I would get her blood on them. It all was ready. I went to the window and I called her, and I hid in the closet until she was in the room. When she saw me naked, she began to cry. And then she tried to run down the stairs. I grabbed her, and she said she would tell her mama. And then I stripped her naked. How did she kick, bite, and scratch? I choked her to death. I cut her in small pieces so I could take my meat to my rooms, cook and eat it. How sweet and tender she was in the oven. Ugh. It took me 9 days to eat her body. Oh my gosh, it's so gross. Ugh. I did not F her, although I could have, had I wished. She died a virgin. So this very letter led to his capture. So the envelope that he used was traceable. So there was a logo on it, and detectives were able to trace it to a specific location. So they had all members of this specific location, give what's it called? Samples of their handwriting. Oh my gosh, I couldn't think there for a minute. Samples of their handwriting, so that they can match it to the letter, but none of them matched. So then a janitor came forward and said that he had taken a lot of the embossed envelopes, but he had left them in his old apartment. So then the detectives go to this apartment building where the landlady does say that yes, there is a man who's been living there for 2 months that matches this old man's description. Albert. Yep, they finally get a name. Albert Fish. So the landlady said that Albert had given her one of his letters to hold for him, and he was going to come back and get it later. And so he did. And on December 19th, 1934, Albert was caught. And when Albert was arrested, he spilled it all. All of it. Spilled it all. Albert confessed to about 100 murders. 100 murders. He said that he had killed a child in every single state. Albert took the detectives to the spot where Grace's body was. Albert confessed to the murders of Billy and Francis. March 11th, 1935, he was tried for Grace's murder, and that's the only murder he was ever tried for. Unbelievably. So they tried to play the insanity card, which all these idiots always want to do. It's funny that they do all these crazy things to people, but then they can't take a harsh punishment like prison. No. Get out of here. So Albert's background was discussed by the defense and how he spent time in the orphanage, 3 marriages, and all these other things that happened that would have put Albert out of his right mind. Look, everybody goes through things, but not everybody becomes a psychopathic, crazy, sadistic murderer. So, no excuses. So his 6 children, would even come to testify to say that he was a great father and that he had never abused them. Yeah, but that's called a great cover-up story, right? But the kids did, say that their dad was pretty cuckoo, you know what I mean? Like that he, when they found the paddle with the nails, and then they were, saying that, when he would, ask for, raw meat and stuff. And the children did also say that he would, strip naked and go on top of the hill outside and scream, "I am Christ." So the defense did use his self-mutilation as well. So the county jail, when Albert was first arrested, they reported that they found over 30 needles embedded into Albert's growing area, when they x-rayed him. Yeah. But the defense team that was working towards the insanity plea, it didn't work. Especially against witness Albert Budd. Yeah, his name was Albert too. Okay. And this was Grace's dad. So they had Albert Budd walk around the room and point out the man who took his daughter, Grace. And he surely did. And that's when they found Albert Fish guilty of the murder of Grace Budd. And Albert was sentenced to death. But Albert's annoying, so he's like, oh, dying would be the most supreme thrill. So annoying. So it was said that Albert was super excited to die by the electric chair. He even asked if he'd be conscious during the moment of his death so that he could taste his own death. So at the age of 66 years old, Albert was set to die by the electric chair January 16th, 1936. So it was said that he was really silent on his way to the execution chamber. It was even said that he prayed. To who? And at 11:09 p.m., Albert was pronounced dead. Goodbye. Forever. Burn in hell. So what do you think about this case? Do you have anything to add that I did not add to this case? I would like to know. Please let me know in the comments. That would be great. I'm sorry that this case was so disturbing. But like I said, there's an importance into knowing some of these things. I wish we didn't have to. I wish none of this stuff ever happened, but it does. And as always, my heart goes out to these families. Did they take the best precautions of their children? No, but you never think something like that's gonna happen to you. And I mean, no one deserves to die out of it anyway. It's so sad. And seriously, my heart really goes out to those families. I know this happened a long time ago, but the heartache is still it's still there. That just never goes away, just the thought of what happened to these children is just beyond. I don't know what to say. Seriously, there are no words for this horrifying thing that had happened to these children. And I just wanted to give this moment to the victims because it's just horrendous. To Francis, Billy, and Grace, wherever you may be, hoping that you're at peace. And I mean, you babies are loved forever. So, yeah. Thank you for hanging out with me. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, and there will be more to come in the near future. All right, you guys. Bye.